Welcome to the Lorecast, where we look into the lore and the stories by which we live. I'm Dr. Craig Chalquist, and you can find us at chalquist.com/podcast and at a number of other online venues. Some of the earliest science fiction writing done by the chemist Isaac Asimov focused on a future in which a galactic empire built by humans was falling. And this was predicted by a scientist, Hari Seldon, who invented a science called psychohistory, a statistical science that could predict the movements of large masses of people. So there's a show called Foundation in Apple TV, very loosely based, very loosely based on all this. And there's a line that struck me that I wanted to mention as a theme for this podcast. And so at one point, there's a scene in which Hari Seldon, Professor Seldon, is confronting the Emperor of the Galaxy, who is angry that Seldon is making the predictions that he's making, of course. And a departure from the books of Asimov is that on the TV show, the emperors are clones. So there's something called imperial cloning in the genetic dynasty. So there's always three emperors. There's Dawn, Day, and Dusk. Dawn is the young clone, Day is the older one, and Dusk is the older still. And so it's the same emperor over and over and over again, basically. And the empire is likewise stuck in the past, stuck in lack of change, addicted to stability. So they're talking about how the fall of the empire might be delayed a few centuries, and only if they end imperial cloning, which of course the emperor doesn't want to do. And here's the line. Seldon says, "I see the value in difference, in the new. You offer nothing new. Just a younger grape from the same vine destined for the same old bottle." Now, the emperor is cast as a thoroughly evil figure, but putting that aside for the moment, I think we can all relate at least sometimes in our lives where we don't want to let go of the old, where we're hanging on to the old. And when we do that, we take up space that could be used for the new. And, Freud made a point about this in his paper Mourning and Melancholia in 1917. He said, in effect, that if we don't consciously mourn what we've lost, then we succumb to depression, which is an act of unconscious mourning, according to Freud. And another way of reading this is that when we hang on to what needs to be let go of, then we're taking up space where something else could be created. And so all of this has been emphasized for me recently, especially over this past year. When I think about transitions, my career is going in a different direction because I'm taking it there, which means a loss of things that I'm doing right now and not seeing people I'm used to seeing and working with students I'm used to working with. I'm realizing that after I finish my second dissertation, I probably won't do any further writing as an academic. This is after decades of academic writing, books, papers, the whole thing. So that will probably go away, except for the occasional paper or chapter that I get invited to write and have time to. And the same with academic conferences. There are personal relationships I've had to let go of, and some difficult recent conversations with my mom about her moving out of the house that she's lived in for more than 60 years, the house my father died in, the house I grew up in, and other transitions as well. And so When I look around at what's happening in the world today, I also see a lot of transitions and losses. In the past, here in the United States, if anyone even talked about a coup, an attempted insurrection, they would have been put in jail. Today, a person who led that coup is running again for president. The country that we thought we lived in doesn't exist anymore, no matter what the outcome of all this. And around the world, I think the present extinction count is up to 150 to 200 species a day because of what we ourselves are doing. And our current president and our leaders around the world, of course, they're making a lot of promises about the environment and fighting climate change and all that. And then they turn around and create new opportunities for petroleum companies. So this is the sort of business as usual that's sending the entire biosphere of the planet into steep decline. And those species, those ways of life are gone and they won't come back. There is some scientific debate about how fast the planet might regenerate and even cool down if we stop screwing up the atmosphere. But regardless, we're in for a long haul on this. We've changed the planet. And as a result, we've changed ourselves. Even in the midst of all this, and of course, we could probably all think of dozens, if not hundreds, of other key changes that we're all facing. Even in the midst of this, we seek out of fear to hold on to old institutes, attitudes, structures, religious beliefs that went out of date centuries ago. But as Carl Jung pointed out quite a while ago, when we refuse to face something that's going on inside of us, it plays out externally. When we refuse to let go of things that no longer serve, personally or collectively, when we refuse to symbolically make the descent into the underworld, which involves a shedding of everything that was familiar as we pass through an initiation on the way to our fuller selves. When we refuse all that, we turn the world into an underworld, which is what we're doing. Instead of making an internal sacrifice, we make an external one that's even larger. So the question arises, how do we let go? How do we let go of the things that we think we can't do without? And this suggests another question, how do we even know we're holding on to something? Because sometimes we do that. Sometimes we stay stuck to things, people, institutions, whatever, and we don't even realize we're doing it. And meanwhile, we're having symptoms. Maybe we get sick. Maybe we're having nightmares, relationship turbulence. And it's all trying to tell us you're hanging on to something you shouldn't be hanging on to anymore. But what? So one thing I've done over the years when I'm in this position is I do an inventory of what hasn't changed in my life over the past 5 years or so. Sometimes even the past year or two. But for the longer view, the more years back, the better. And ask yourself, what's the same in my life now that was true back then? Do I have the same job or the same kind of job? Am I in the same relationship? Do I have the same political attitudes, the same habits? And really do an inventory. And then once you've got your list, go through and really sit with each one of those in a deeply honest way. So say it's a relationship, you've been in it for a while. So really sit down with yourself. This relationship, is it really what I need right now? Is it giving me and my partner what we need? Is it serving both of us? Is there something about it that needs a course correction? Is there something about it we need to discard? Because sometimes it's not a matter of letting go the entire thing. Maybe it's just an adjustment, right? And the same with a job, the same with any of the other things on your list. It may be that they are still serving you and they need to stay on the list. And it may be that it's time for them to go. One thing on my list is that for decades I've been working with PhD students in various capacities, dissertation chair, personal advising, things like that, helping them work toward their PhD and become academics. Done that for a long time. And what I realized over the past year is that it's time for this to end. I'm losing interest in it. I'm more interested in taking learnings out of the academy and moving them out into the world where the transformation needs to happen. And that's where my heart is, and I need to follow that. So aside from just a couple of current dissertation students who I'm going to see through the entire process, I'm going to be finished. So that's going to come off my list. So do your inventory and really sink into exploring what should be here, what should come off, what needs to change. That's part of making the descent. Another part of this, and it's intimately linked to it, is determining what has already died for you. Sometimes people worry because they start having dreams about death and funerals and things like that. And there's no need to take all that literally. It sometimes does line up with somebody dying. But the primary push behind dreams like that, for the most part, seems to be that there's some symbolic death that needs to happen. Something has to go away. And part of what these dreams do is they alert us to the fact that our heart, our soul, our energy, our spirit is no longer in something that once meant a great deal to us. And perhaps our conscious mind hasn't caught up yet. When I was younger, I was in a pattern of working for institutions that were always somehow failing a bit, institutions that had potential but they really needed help. And then a day came when I started having death dreams and death at work dreams and things like that. And then I went to work one other day, and I thought, I really don't want to be here anymore. I really don't want to be in this codependent relationship with these places anymore. It's really not up to me whether they sink or swim. And at this point, having given so much to so many people who were in various kinds of need, I think it would be better to join efforts, particularly professionally, with groups of people who are going somewhere. Now, another thing that you can do by way of a self-assessment is look at your schedule. And I actually did a video on demand on this topic called Concentrate Your Life. It's over on Vimeo. And that came from direct experience. And I take my own advice. So I was looking over my schedule this last semester, which was the busiest semester I ever had. And some of that was beyond my control. There was professional slash school glitch that screwed up my schedule. That happens sometimes, and I ended up working more than I should have. But aside from that, I looked at my schedule and I said, all right, where is my time going? What am I actually spending time during the day, during the week, on that I don't need to be or shouldn't be? And this, by the way, is a good thing to do at the end of the year. So some things you have to spend time on, some things you can tighten up, and some you can just plain eliminate. And where we get in trouble with this is when we rationalize and say, well, I can't eliminate this because. So when you hear yourself do that, take a second look at what you're focusing on. Speaking of time wasters and not spending time where you should, another thing to assess is, are you waiting on someone? Whether that's an individual someone or a group of someones, kind of long term, rather indefinitely. And I don't mean things like they said they get back to you in a week and stuff like that. What I'm talking about is you're waiting for an organization to change somehow, or you're waiting for someone to make a big decision and they haven't given you a time when they're going to, and you've been waiting and waiting. You're waiting for someone to change, which is almost always a losing endeavor, that kind of thing. So those can be pruned, usually. It depends on what the situation is and how invested you are in it, but that's something to look at. Are you waiting for changes that may never come? Are you waiting for people to change? And why would they? Do they not only have adequate motivation, but do they have a plan for change with specific steps in it? That's something to ask. Otherwise, you really need to look at why you're waiting for them and what that's about for you psychologically. Another place to check in, your body. Sometimes the body knows more than the conscious mind does, and it will tell you if you're in situations that you need to let go of. And one part of my body that's absolutely infallible with this is my back. When my back starts to hurt, or when I pull a muscle in my back, something's up. Something's being held on to that I need to let go. And if you think about the symbolism of the back, it's your basic support, your backstop. It's the center in some ways of your body. It supports your entire body. Symbolically, to have a backache means some different things to different people, but it can mean what's on my back right now, who's on my back. Is someone I shouldn't be trusting stabbing me in the back? Does my back say, I really wish that somebody would have your back? So there's lots of ways of interpreting that, but checking in with the body about maybe it's protesting something in your life that needs to go out. What makes these and other things hard to give up is they change the way we see ourselves. They involve a change of identity, which is another way of saying the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. When it's time for things to change, very often it's time for that story to change. And at that point, things can get painful. But it's necessary to change the story sometimes. Making these kinds of changes that let go of what no longer serves are ways to welcome in the new. Ways to greet what's waiting in the wings, but needs space in your life in order to actually flourish. Or sometimes even show up. And another thing to consider as the next cycle in your life begins is, where is the joy? Where is the fun? Where is the novelty, the play, the creativity? So often we enslave ourselves to what we think is practical. We should do this. We should do that. The world needs this. The world needs that. But I would go so far as to say that unless we're in touch with imagination and play and creativity, we don't stand much of a chance of staying on this planet much longer. These are not only eco-resilient resources, but they help us support people who are out there making change in the world. The first responders not only of crisis, but of civilization itself. They need our support. And if we can give them stories and tools and resources to do their jobs a little easier, then we're serving their cause too. And in that way, the new grapes of possibility can go into new containers, new bottles that fit the time. Or if we do a quick change of images here, as we grow the seedlings of what's new, we water them with the tears of many departures. Painful at first, but grief has its own momentum, as I mentioned in a previous podcast. And after the grief has spent itself, the new possibilities appear. Thank you.